be sitting in a seat with red tape. Also, masks must be worn at all times, and as always, food and drink is not allowed in the auditorium other than bottled water. Thank you and enjoy the event.
Good evening, I'm Lainey, and Fatu and myself have been working on this event for a little over a month, so thank you, Fatu, for being my right hand in all of this. Also, thank you to our host, Emma Sellers, for helping us put this event on. Before the event starts, I would like to say that some things may be a little too emotional, so if emotions start to overwhelm you, Fatu and myself will be in the back and we will direct you to the right personnel. Also, keep in mind the social distancing rules, and after, when Pelicans will be outside, you'll give them your Admit One ticket and you'll get a free cone. Remember, do not congregate around Pelicans because we will get in trouble. Thank you and stay educated.
Well, changing people's prejudices, that's something no law can fix. African Americans have continued to face violence and discrimination. But dedicated activists are keeping the world's attention on the issue. The legacy of the civil rights movement lives on in these new generations and in other groups who have been inspired by its successes. Women, immigrants, gay and transgender people.
In my life, I've been told that Black people do not deserve the same quality of life that a white person does. I've also been told that if I ever date a person of another race, that I will be going to hell. And then the final thing I've recently heard is that Black Lives Matter is propaganda and is not actually for the equal betterment of Black lives. And this just makes me feel really frustrated because I don't understand like how in today's society that racism is still taught and it's still learned by people. And like right now, this is definitely a movement to get everybody on the same page.
Situations where it feels like I don't belong around here. Situations I can think about is like maybe sometimes even in the locker room when I first came up here, like my freshman year, it felt kind of divided. Even though it wasn't physically divided, it felt that way.
As a white male in America, I've been looked at as a superior. In reality, we all are equal, we all do the same.
To deploy the National Guard in sufficient numbers that we dominate the streets.
I just didn't feel comfortable in my own skin, in my own neighborhood, or felt, I guess, safe in a sense to where like people wouldn't be taking a picture of me or taking videos of me while I'm walking my dog.
Back here now to that other major story we are following tonight. Investigators looking closely at surveillance video appearing to show the final moments of Ahmaud Arbery just before he was shot and killed by a father and son who said they were trying to make a citizen's arrest.
By 1:15 p.m., a second 911 call.
There's a black male running down the street.
When detectives arrived at the scene at 1:45 p.m., Arbery was dead.
As a Black woman in America, I fear for my life on the daily, just going out. I fear for my brothers and my father's life as they go out, because you never know if they'll come home, because the justice system is so corrupted.
States were required to keep these prisons filled, even if nobody was committing a crime.
It's so difficult to talk about mass incarceration because it has become heavily monetized.
I'm afraid that the lesbians on the softball team are going to molest them every time they went in. And so I would constantly tell them, like, that's not appropriate, and lesbians are not molesters. LGBT are not molesters. It's an irrational fear.
Traumatized and injured clubbers were held from the scene and taken to hospital for treatment.
We can't wait to talk about violence against Black trans women when they're murdered.
Right now, it's a community shocked and saddened by recent murders of 2 transgender women.
I'll repeat that. We can't wait to talk about violence against Black trans women until they are murdered and slain in the street.
I know being a Honduran woman, it's very offensive whenever everybody automatically assumes that like all Hispanics and Latinos are Mexican, and that's clearly not the case.
It is unnecessary to separate children from their families. It is unnecessary to have a policy to detain innocent women and families that have harmed no person and are legally seeking asylum in the United States of America. It is unnecessary to have a policy that calls children unaccompanied when they arrive with older brothers, sisters, and grandparents and treat them no differently than human traffickers.
This Border Patrol processing center there in McAllen, Texas, is kind of the epicenter of all of this family separation debate, where the majority of these families are being separated from their kids. And that's the place which is often called the dog kennel. So you see these kind of chain link fence rooms where people are kind of divided. The parents are put to one side, the kids are taken to another.
I've been to a store before with me and my friends, and one of the managers followed us to the store to make sure we weren't going to take anything.
As a mother raising two Black males, this is scary. I'm tired of it. I have one with a college degree, no record, and he still does not even know how to act when he's out in public, when he's around police officers. He's afraid. And now I have a 17-year-old growing up, and he don't know what to do either. I don't know what to tell him. We're tired.
There is a specific problem that is happening in the African American community that's not happening in other communities.
And as long as America postpones justice, we stand in the position of having these recurrences of violence and riots over and over again. Social justice and progress are the absolute guarantors of riot prevention.
Welcome to the talk. I first want to thank LR students Lainey Fox and Fatu Saul for their leadership and dedication to creating this panel discussion. The passion that they have for inclusion and equity is infectious, and I'm thankful to have these students as a part of our Bear family. Next, I want to thank our panelists who have prepared for tonight's events and who have taken on a difficult role of discussing personal topics with their peers. And thank you to Pastor Christy Lorsap, who will be providing a closing for us, and her willingness to meet with any student tonight if needed. And thank you to those in attendance and those of you who are watching via Zoom. The support that we are seeing tonight is great, and it's very comforting to know that this is our family. First, I want to give a quick background on the title, The Talk. Growing up as an African-American person, many Black children will receive the talk from their parents. This isn't the talk about the birds and the bees, but rather the talk on how to exist and survive in this country as a person of color. There's protocol for how to handle police interactions, guidelines on how we can walk in the store and where to put your hands. A roadmap is provided on how to navigate the many social injustices that we'll surely face simply based on the color of our skin. Tonight, we want to have a talk. We want to talk about issues of social injustice that you all face either directly or indirectly. We have a series of questions that will be asked, and our panelists will respond to them. They're on a variety of topics, and they will be answered from the perspective of the panelists. We are hopeful to have some time for question and answer, but I want to make sure that our panelists have ample time to share their stories and to respond. As Lainey mentioned, if you need to step out for any reason, please go to the back and let Lainey or Fatu know so they can guide you to appropriate staff if needed. First, I want to start with a quick introduction of each panelist. Panelists, if you'll remove your mask briefly and then replace it after you give your name, where you're from, and your classification. We'll start with one.
Hey there, everybody. My name is Juan Martinez. I am from Morganton, North Carolina, which is about 30 minutes away from here, and I classify myself as a Guatemalan.
How you doing, everyone? My name is Damian Medwinter. I'm from Trumbull, Connecticut. I classify myself as an African-American male.
Hello, my name is Olivia Nunn. I'm from Lexington, North Carolina, and I classify myself as white.
Hello, everyone. My name is Stephanie Minter. I am from Wake Forest, North Carolina, and I am a Black woman.
Hello, everyone. My name is William Fisher. I'm from Granite Falls, North Carolina, and I am a white male.
Thank you. So I'm going to, again, just read the question, and then each panelist, I'll give you a little bit of time so you can get the microphone back and forth. So I might skip around a little bit, but they'll all have the same question. So question one, we'll start with William. Have you at one point in your life experienced racial or social injustice?
So I grew up in a very well-educated home. Those type of injustices were not tolerated in my house. However, attending a predominantly white and rural high school, those types of things happened a lot. And it was always just incredibly disheartening to see these things happening, and often caused a lot of internal confusion because my peers and other students in my high school were saying these things while at home that wasn't allowed. So that's what I've experienced.
Thank you. Olivia, have you at one point in your life experienced racial or social injustice?
I'm about the same way. I personally have not experienced racial or social injustice because of the color of my skin, and I never will. But through educating myself, I can look back on my life and recognize the areas where social injustice and racial injustice did occur. Similarly, I'm from a very rural and poverty-stricken hometown, and a lot of the battles that the minority groups face are because the white people live in this sort of bubble where the only exposure that they do have to minority groups are the ones that are battling the war on drugs and increased criminalization and issues like that. So they reflect their perception on minority groups as a whole to what they experience rather than educating themselves on the minority groups as a whole. The majority have this bias towards minority groups, and this is where the racist stereotype develops. And it's just disheartening that I was a part of that for so long because I was also in that bubble. It took going and placing myself into their shoes. I went to a high school my junior year where I was the only white person, and I was able to educate myself through them and through their love that they showed me, and bring that back to my hometown and my household and educate my peers through those instances and interactions that I had.
Thank you. And Juan, the same question.
So yeah, coming in, I had a couple handfuls of things I wanted to talk about, whether that was just questions about immigration. Someone looks at me and one of some of the first questions they ask is, are you legal? It's extremely offensive. And other things is are you Mexican? No, I classify myself as a Guatemalan. Many people just assume every Latino is a Mexican. But one thing I've just been battling very consistently throughout my life, I would say, is the standards that are kind of put on me. People expect me to know a certain level of Spanish, and if I don't know it, then I'm not considered a Latino male. I'm not accepted by the culture, or people who look at me don't want to accept me for who I am in general. And so that's something that's just been very disheartening to face. And it kind of goes back, and I kind of want to add a little bit towards my background. So my parents immigrated here in the United States in the 1990s. And for them, they were totally immersed in their culture. They knew so much about Spanish, and coming in and transitioning to the United States, it was like a total 180 flip. And so for them to transition to go to Spanish to English, just so they could survive in the United States, was very difficult. And so when they were raising me, of course, they knew that English was, the predominant language here and that I would have to learn it. And so throughout my life, I was, forced into learning English. And, it's such a difficult thing to juggle if you're trying to learn Spanish and English, especially at the same time. That adds pressure on your youth age, but then it's, something that, it lives with you. And so constantly it's something that I kind of battle with. And especially with my parents, being in Guatemala, they have a different dialect than what is spoken throughout the rest of the world, throughout different Spanish languages. And so going from that, I think it's much more difficult than what people assume, saying like, oh, your parents are Hispanic, why didn't you learn Spanish? I just think that from then on, that's just a very, a difficult mindset to have, but it's something that I kind of want to face and challenge with. And the way I go about it, though, as of now, is just being able to just continue to educate myself in that language and, speak it to the best of my ability. It doesn't necessarily have to be perfect, but I think the effort and participation I put into it speaks volume to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephanie, have you at one point in your life experienced racial or social injustice?
Absolutely. It's no shock to anybody who can see me. I am a Black woman. Just growing up, going to a predominantly white school from kindergarten to 12th grade, being that one Black friend in the group, not having many people that looked like me. Just from how I looked, what I dressed, my appearance, my hair, like wearing braids, just not feeling like I fit in, not feeling like I belonged. Even more recently, I was here, it was sophomore year. I was here early, like over the summer because orientation, I was an orientation leader and we had to be here early for training. And I had dropped my friend Fatu off. We had dinner that night and I dropped her off. I was just driving and there was two white guys sitting in the bed of their truck and they were just talking, whatever. So I'm driving by and I hear them call me a slur. They called me the N-word, not the cute one with the A. They called me the one with the hard ER in the end. And I am sure that, somebody's called me that and I just haven't heard it, but I have never actually heard it. Someone called me this just because of the color of my skin. They don't know me. I could be the president's daughter and they called me that solely by the color of my skin. And I just stopped my car and I just sat there and I was like, what just happened? I was floored. I was in disbelief. And I called my mom and I'm like, Mom, this just happened to me. And she's like, this is the world we live in. These people will probably never get to know you. They were probably drinking and that's how they see you. They will never look at you and call you that to your face, but because they were drinking, because they were under the influence, that's how they feel about you. And you just have to be wary about who you hang around. So that's the experiences that I've dealt with. Like in school, not a lot of representation. I've had 2 Black teachers from kindergarten to 12th grade. So those are just some of the things that I've experienced personally.
Okay, thank you. And Damien, your experience, or have you experienced racial, social injustice?
How everybody doing today? Well, I just want to talk about myself. I'm from Trumbull, Connecticut. Trumbull is predominantly white. My mom made sure that she moved me into a neighborhood where there wasn't a lot of struggles that we had to deal with, that she had to deal with when she was younger. She knew all the things that would come, but there was a talk that she had to have with me before everything happened. It was just like, you're gonna be somewhere uncomfortable. You're not gonna see a lot of people like you. It's something that you just have to deal with right now. So I could talk about a story. One time I was in middle school. I'll never forget this one kid. He dropped the N-word, but with the ER on it. And me, I just want to handle the situation. I'm telling myself, I'm gonna handle the situation. But something came to me. It was like, you know what? No, let me just go to the teacher. Let the teacher handle it. He might get kicked out. Let me set that aside. So I actually go to a guidance counselor. So the guidance counselor is talking to me. He's like, you know what? Maybe he didn't mean it. So after that, now I'm lost. I'm like, hold on, I done went to the teacher. My mom telling me, go to the teacher if anything happened. And the teacher telling me maybe he didn't mean it. So after that, it was just like, I was lost, I was shocked. Came home, told my mom, and then my mom, she got involved. She was at the school first thing in the morning. But that wasn't just one time. My mom constantly was coming down to the school because it was always something. I was the only Black kid. I was tall, I was full of energy, I was talking in class, the teacher, what is going on with this kid? So my parents kept coming down to school. Recently, me and one of my friends were actually on the road this guy cuts me off. It's a white guy. He cuts me off. And I'm like, oh, like, I'm thinking he hit my car. My music's kind of loud. So I'm like, bro, did this dude, like, did he just hit my car? And my friend, he's like, bro, I'm not sure. So we pull up to like a red light. And like, I get out because I'm trying to check to see if he hit my car. So the guy, he gets out. And it says veteran on his car. So I'm like, oh, it's like an older guy. I'm like, oh, he's probably just going to be like, if anything happened, he's going to be okay. So he gets out, he's like, hey, I didn't hit your car. I'm like, oh no, I'm just checking. So then I'm still out there. And he's like, Black lives doesn't matter. I'm sitting there, I'm shocked. Like, I don't know what to say. I'm just sitting there like, what do I do? And then my friend, he goes, yo, get in the car. You got too much to lose. You're on a full scholarship. You got too much to lose. Don't even do it. Don't even think about it. After that, I just sat back. I'm sitting in the car, and like, we get to his house, we probably sit in the car for like an hour in just pure silence. And I didn't think it was real. Like, you see everything, like, people say this might happen to them. I know it's real. Obviously, I know it's real, but like, oh, it happened to me. You know, a lot of people say, oh, it didn't happen to me. So, you know what? Whatever. But it happened to me. You know what I'm saying? So that's how I piece.
No, thank you all for sharing and letting us into your home and your before LR life a little bit and shared a little bit. One thing that was mentioned almost consistently is the shock, whether you experience this personally or, you know, how you're raised and then seeing it outside of your home, just the shock. And I think that's something that we have to understand that marginalized populations sit with is a constant shock that, wow, this happened, this is happening, I'm going through this. And that's just something that we shouldn't lose in this conversation from what our panelists have shared. So the next question, and you can think about this experience that you just shared or get more broad or change, but how has this experience affected your overall well-being, your overall security of being you in this world? And we'll start with Juan.
That is a deep question. But no, yeah, I would say throughout my years, it's just been difficult to handle for sure, especially middle school and high school. I think it's very, very visible there. And just the way it's just landed on me, it's kind of made me feel like it was my fault. Like, it's my blame is on me for not learning Spanish or just who I am. And so it was really a terrible mindset to have. It's very degrading, very belittling of myself. And I just think it played a huge role in my confidence and just how I presented myself. But overall, it's just much more difficult. But as you grow up, I kind of had the maturity of, you know, not keeping it necessarily to myself, but being more spoken about it and asking for help around us. Because I think this kind of situation that we face isn't an individual problem, but more as a community. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to ask if our panelists can get a little closer to the mic. We have about 100 and some people on Zoom and are just having a little bit of hard time hearing. So let's just make sure we get a little closer and speak as much louder as we can. So for Olivia, the same question. How has this experience just affected you overall?
It's kind of just like extremely disheartening as an individual at first because of the fact that, it took me until George Floyd and Breonna Taylor to like realize what my peers were going through. And that's hard. Like, it sucks that it took me 21 years to like open my eyes and be like, dang, like there is a problem in our world. And then it was just like a flood of emotions of like, I'm so hurt by the burdens that like my friends have been carrying. I'm so hurt that like my friends are scared for their lives and I'm just now realizing it. And then it turns into like, if this is what I'm feeling, like what are they feeling? And like what have they been feeling like for their entire lives? Like what are their mothers feeling? Like what are their fathers? Like it was a stab to my heart, and it's hard to just accept it and to see the question boil down to, oh, this is just how the world is. That's the most disheartening piece of it, is that they are to the point where they have to say, this is just how the world works. But why? Like, why are we here? I don't understand like how we can, as a community, as an LR community, as the world, like how can we devalue someone based off of the color of their skin? And it's just this internal turmoil within my heart of how to love the person beside me well enough that it might spread to them, that they might want to love their neighbor more. So yeah, it creates more of a hurt for me because I can't imagine the hurt that my peers are going through.
Thank you. William, how has these experiences affected you?
You know, it's really hard to put myself in the shoes of somebody who's experienced these things. And I have to recognize, as a straight white male from a rural county where I wasn't around these like people of color, that I will never truly understand what these people go through, what all these atrocities happen. And it hurts me knowing that no matter how many conversations I have with the people I grew up with, 5 years old to 18 years old, that no matter how many conversations I have, they will never understand and I will never understand. And recently it's just kind of come to the point of I don't know what to do anymore. I don't know how to support my friends here at LR. I don't know how to support people across the country because I'll never understand, no matter how hard I try.
Thank you. Damien, same question.
Just thinking on like how something can affect another person. Me, just like personally, I'm more nervous than anything. I feel like when I go out on the road, it's just like I'm driving to get to where I have to go to, and it's like all of a sudden my life could change just like that. I feel like the first time I ever got pulled over, I never thought it was gonna happen. I was like, I always drive, I drive good, the cops never gonna pull me over. So this one day, I don't know, I think I was just in a rush, and I was trying to get back home from school, and the cops pulled me over. And I'm sitting there like, I see the cops behind me, but I'm shaking more than like ever. So my sunroof is open, and I pull over to the side. I still have my foot on the brake. I put my hands through the sunroof because that's why I just thought you were just supposed to just put your hands up. So I put my hands through the sunroof, and then the officer is talking from behind, and he's like, you can take your hands out of the sunroof and put the car in park. So I'm sitting there like, I don't want to move too fast. So now I'm like, I'm nervous, so I am moving fast. So I'm like, can you come up to the side? And this is my first time ever being pulled over. So he's like, I guess he was just like, yo, is this kid okay? But when he finally got there, I was like, okay, I'm gonna put my hands down now. Like they're gonna come down. And then so he was like, is this your car? I'm like, yeah, my mom, like my mom paid for it. So I'm like, yeah, it's my mom's car. So I'm sitting there. He's like, all right, you could get your stuff. So I'm telling him everything I'm gonna do. I'm telling him, I'm gonna put my hands, I'm gonna grab everything that you need. I finally give it to him. And now I'm just like shaking. I don't know what to do. Another officer pulls up, and then they see my high school logo on my shirt. So they're asking me questions. They're like, oh, you're in high school? And I'm like, yeah. Then basketball comes up, and it seems like everything is good. Like everything's fine. So I'm good. But just to think like how nervous I was, I didn't think I should have been that nervous. And I called my mom, and she's like, are you okay? Like, I'm like, I'm just trying to get home. I didn't even get back in my car that day, but it was just crazy to think, just nervous. That's the word.
Thanks. Stephanie.
Well, just being truthful, because this is our truth that we're speaking. Like I said, I went to a predominantly white school. There were not a lot of Black girls like me, but just growing up and not having that representation, I always struggled with myself. Like I never felt good enough. Like I never looked like the other girls. I never looked like everybody else. And even now, like you think like, oh, like being interested in people, like, you know, when you're a kid, you're, oh, I like this guy. But, you know, if it's a white guy, you're always questioning, does this person like me because of the color of my skin? And I know my friends and I have conversations about that to this day. But it's just alarming to hear how many other Black women have the same or similar stories to me, like just how diminishing your mental health is, how your view of yourself is diminished because of the color of your skin, because you don't feel comfortable in your skin, because you grow up in these situations where you're not accepted, you're not what the norm is. And I am still to this day, like going through my journey of unlearning all of the unhealthy thoughts and unhealthy just practices that I had growing up, because I did not love myself. And I'm unlearning all of that right now. And yeah, it just to give you a little story, over the summer when everything was happening, there was a week, just a week where like everything was happening. Like I don't remember like who exactly it was, but there was like 3 or 4 like Black people that were killed by police officers. And it was a lot. It was a lot. And I woke up one morning, go to Twitter. That was my first mistake. I went to Twitter and I'm laying in bed and I look and there was a video of someone being killed and I just broke down. And I go to my mom's room. I'm 22 years old, guys. I go to my mom's room, went to mommy, and I was like, Mom, it's just a lot. And 22 years old, I laid in my mom's arms and I cried, and she could not console me. She couldn't give me a reason why all of this was happening. I'm 22 years old. I'm supposed to be an adult, guys. I graduate in May. But this is the truth that a lot of Black people are going through. No matter how old I get, my mom still cannot explain to me why this is happening. It's too much. It's just too much. But yeah.
I might need to step away myself. Thank you for being that authentic. I appreciate that. And Juan, I think you're the last one for this question. How's the experience affected? He's already gone? I'm sorry, have we all gone? I got wrapped up. I apologize. That's on me. Thank you all. So no matter who you are, what our walk of life that we identify with, consistent, nervous, anxious, confusion, learning and relearning and unlearning are some common things that all of us said. Why do you all think that we're here? Why does this injustice exist? What are your thoughts? We'll start with Olivia.
Honestly, I think it stems out of selfishness. Humans are selfish. I'm selfish. The person you're sitting beside is selfish. It's human instinct to care more about yourself than the person sitting beside you. And injustice exists because of this, in my opinion, because the person beside you thinks that they deserve more than you do. They want to, sorry. I think to want better from the person sitting beside you than you do for yourself is the starting point. A lot of minority groups are fighting for things that I won't even see a direct correlation in my own life with, but it's a choice that I have to make on the daily basis to care. I have to choose to care. I have to choose to want to do better. I have to choose to educate myself. And I have to choose to do this so that my neighbors can live a better life, so my peers can live a better life, so my friends and my boyfriend and the people that I sit beside in class can live a life that I want to see everyone have, not just a life that the white male or the white woman gets access to in America. And if you're in the same shoes as me, like, I just urge you to choose to care, because at this point, if you're not fighting against it, you're contributing to the problem at hand. And that's just the biggest issue, is that we have so many people just like sitting back and being like, okay, like, yeah, like you can go and fight this battle. I'm like, yeah, like good for you, but I'm gonna sit back and watch. Like, we need everybody just stepping forward. Like, this is our generation and we have the power to like make a difference and like be a voice like for our peers. So just stop choosing to sit back and step up.
Thank you. William, why do you believe these injustices exist?
I think that our education system as a whole is responsible for a large part of these injustices. And I think that in general, a lot of our educators today aren't challenging these ideologies and thoughts that are so ingrained in some communities. And I think it's a shame that there are several universities and institutions sending out future educators that aren't willing to challenge their students, aren't willing to challenge themselves to question. Yeah, I mean, I think that's where it all stems, is just not willing to challenge your thoughts and not challenging each other.
Thank you. Juan.
I 100% agree with Olivia and Will. I think it's very true. We're either too selfish, or we're just not educating ourselves to the extent where we can actually stand up and voice our opinions as well. But there's just things to it as well. I believe that people just also want to push down people. They don't want to see people strive. They want to see themselves strive. And I think this is very visible in a personal experience for me, especially with my parents, is the fact of them becoming U.S. citizen. In the process of going through that, it's very difficult to the extent where it's nearly impossible. And so I just think that either in some way they don't want them to be citizens, or they just want them to quit. And it's just such a sad thing to see, because I think there's many people who are willing to put in the work and effort. There are people who just wanted to push them down. And I think everyone wants to progress, but if everyone progresses, someone will regress. And I think that is such a sad thing to see. But like I said, social injustice exists because I do think, going back to what we said before, we are selfish, and that we're not educating ourselves well enough to make this difference.
Thank you. Olivia, and then Damien. Stephanie, and then Damien. I'm sorry.
Well, it's like injustice, like the idea of just the action of being unjust. It's something that is taught. Racism, you're not born being a racist. You're not born with these bias. It's something that is taught, and it stems from generations way beyond our own, way beyond the generations of my mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother. It's something that from the beginning of time, someone had the idea that I am better than someone else. And it's usually marginalized groups, whether it be someone of color, whether it be women, whether it be LGBTQ+. Like, I just feel like it's something that is learned. And I also believe that we are here today because there is a lack of accountability. We do not hold people who are in positions of power, leaders, police officers, even ourselves. We don't hold ourselves accountable. Therefore, when stuff happens, we let it slide. People are not held accountable, so other people see that. And when other people see that, they think, oh, it's okay for me to do it as well. So I think that's why we are in the position that we are in mainly today.
Thank you.
I agree as well. They're just not taking the time to learn history. I feel like, obviously in school, everybody takes American government. Like, I'm in American government class right now, and you spend a little bit of time talking about African Americans and, Africans, and then being turned into African Americans. It's just so much that people don't know. People don't want to take the time to understand what's really going on. And then you have people at home teaching the little kids, like, oh, stay away from that kid because of the skin color, or how another person talks, how another person looks. And it's just like, you don't understand, because you're born innocent. Like, you're a little kid, you're walking around, you see another kid, hey, I want to play. Like, but there's other people out there telling their kids, no, you can't play with that kid. So I just feel like people not taking the time to learn our history, because history repeats itself over and over again.
I'm going to ask a question that actually has just come to my mind, so it's not one that you already had ahead of time. And don't feel pressure to answer this, but I appreciate, and I think the folks listening appreciate hearing some personal stories. I think that is the greatest way to educate people, and hold people accountable. You can't hate someone that you love, right? And you're in front of your peers virtually as well. Is there a personal story? Is there something that you wish that you could leave with the 150 or so people listening to challenge them to just do better? whether you want to take it from a personal story angle or just some words of advice to give people to just do better. Anybody want to? I won't call on you if you don't. Okay, Damien will start.
So this past January, I was here, obviously at school, and one of my friends named Mubarak Suleiman, he was actually shot and killed by a police officer. I was here. I got a phone call from his brother. When I got the news, I was kind of like, I was in shock. I ran to my coach's office, and I was sitting there, I was bawling my eyes out. My friend had been diagnosed with schizophrenia, and he had been going through an episode today, the day that it happened, and he was on a high-speed chase with police officers. Everyone knew that he was going through an episode, so other towns called off the chase. They knew he was heading home. He didn't get to make it home. He was underneath the bridge, and a police officer, they said he had a weapon on him, which they said he had a knife. By the time he started, he's sitting down in the car, and then you see an officer telling him, they break the windows, like, stop moving, stop moving. By that time, already 7 shots had rang off and gone. 19-year-old kid. I just sit, like, I was sitting back and just thinking about it, like I'm never gonna be able to see my friend again. Won a state championship in high school together. It's crazy to think about, like, your life could be over just like that. And there's body cam video that got released. People might say, where does that even come into this? But the officer called him the N-word before it even happened. So it was just, like, for me, it just hurt, like, it hurt real bad, just because I'm over here, I'm all the way in North Carolina. My friend is at home, and I know I'm never gonna be able to see him again. The protests all over, we see all the protests that happen. My mom telling me everything's gonna be okay. And then he's Muslim, so I didn't get to see him be buried or anything. In 2 days, everything got taken care of. Just thinking about how mental health doesn't get talked about at all in the Black communities. I know a lot of people just laugh, keep it moving. But just to think, simply me, like, just driving, like, something, we don't know what can happen, but I'm never gonna be able to see my friend again. His mom's not gonna be there, his brother, 19-year-old Black kid, just like, what's next? You know what I'm saying? Living constantly, what's next? Like, I don't want one of my teammates, I don't never want that phone call to have it come back again, like, oh, yo, you know, so-and-so. And, like, me to be that first one to be there, and then my mom, like, trying to figure out, do I need to come down to fly and see my son? I'm only in North Carolina while she's in Connecticut. Just don't want to have to go through that again.
Wow, thank you very much for sharing that. Any other panelists, a personal story that you would like to share or comfortable sharing to leave with the charge? And we have a couple more questions, but I just wanted to ask that if you're willing. Okay. And no, that's perfectly fine. Damien, thank you so much for sharing that. Our next question, what is the best way of combating social injustice in all areas nowadays? Thinking about your generation, you, and I think Olivia said it earlier, you're the future, this group, you all are our future. What can you all do to combat this? We'll start with Stephanie.
I think one of the best ways is to have a conversation like we are having right now, being open, being real, being straight up, unfiltered. I believe that working through that uncomfortableness, like, I feel like whenever you filter your experiences, it diminishes them and it won't get through to the other person the way it needs to get through to them effectively. I just feel that no change will come when we sugarcoat how our experiences have affected us, have changed us. Holding others accountable, as I mentioned earlier, for their actions and words. You know, police killing innocent Black people and people of color is not what they were meant to do. They are meant to serve and protect their communities. And killing Black people and people of color is not protecting them. Now, with me saying that, I'm not condemning all police officers because I do not believe all police officers are bad, but I do believe that our system is evil and it was meant to harm Black people and people of color. And it has failed us, it's failed us. But I just believe education, protesting, having conversations, becoming more educated, trying to understand people that are different from you. I believe that that is a way that we can combat this.
Thanks. William?
I believe education reform is first and foremost in ending these injustices, and that extends past the classroom. BLET, basic law enforcement training, family dinners. We have to challenge each other. We have to. If we don't, these conversations won't ever happen. Change won't ever happen. We have to stand undivided together and speak against these things. And that shouldn't be just one group. Like, we as a humanity have to stand up and speak against this because it's not okay.
Thank you. Juan, what is the best way of combating this social injustice?
I want to go a little bit more in depth and a different perspective with what Stephanie said. Like, I 100% agree with her. And I just think, as of now, I'm going to go ahead and talk about how I love this conversation, how so we're such a diverse panel, but we also have an outlook and an outreach to our own Pacific people. I think if we want to really make an impactful difference, we have to talk to those that are in our circle. And I can look at this in a given example. I'll talk about this with Will, because I know Will pretty greatly outside this conversation. If I was ever going to talk to about Will's family about something, I think it'd be more impactful if it came from him rather than it came from me, simply because of his ethnicity and being able to reach them. And I just think that is such a powerful thing. I think we have to get to the part where we're uncomfortable, and that's, for me, is where the most growth actually comes out of as well. And I just want to continue to say is when you have these conversations, you got to go in it as a conversation, not as a debate. We all understand that everyone wants to be heard, but no one wants to be wrong. And I think that's the most difficult thing about these conversations as well. So kind of the idea of like, don't shut the person, but just be an active listener. Because a missed opportunity for dialogue is a missed opportunity for conflict resolution. And I just want to continue going more into depth as well. You don't necessarily respect what they have to say. It very could be offensive, but you also have to think about it as you also have to respect the right, you have to respect the right for the freedom for them to say that as well. And I just think it gets very mumbled and mixed up between those. And it's, like I said, we all have the freedom of speech, but we don't have to necessarily agree with them. Sorry, this is a lot. This is a lot. I try to write these notes down, but it's so much more harder to say and so much harder to do. Yeah, the last thing I want to say is a change is like a plant. You first have to plant the seed, but you got to come back and water it, and you got to come back and nurture it. This problem isn't going to be fixed in a day. This is a generational problem. But in order to make this difference happen, we got to start now. And going back to what Will said, it's an education. We got to continue to educate what's right and what's wrong. Thank you.
And Olivia.
To combat injustice, first off, we have to start by fixing the system that we live in. If somebody doesn't see that the system is messed up, then we have to show them. Like, you can't just tell somebody, oh, the system is messed up. If you don't show, a lot of people are going to say, how don't they see? Like we have to sit here, and if we have to go over a debate, not legit a debate, but have the conversation, have a talk, and not just hear my side. I just want to hear my side and give you what I feel and see where the other people are coming from. You know what I'm saying? Teaching real history. I feel like if we're constantly talking about, like, history repeats itself. Everyone knows history keeps on repeating itself. So let's talk about the real things that are at hand. If we're gonna keep on trying to nip in the butt and say, you know, let's put a Band-Aid here, let's put a Band-Aid here, one day it's just gonna come out with a whole bunch of emotions. So I feel like we just have to teach real history in my eyes.
Going off of what he said, I think we need to go off of realness and learn how to appreciate it, and being uncomfortable and learning how to be okay with that, like that has already been said. But another thing that I think is super important is if you aren't experiencing these acts of social injustice and these acts of racial injustice, that you need to lend your ear, but not only like hear people out, but also believe them and their experiences. I think a lot happens to where we hear things and it's like, oh, like, yeah, like that happened to you, but I don't really know how you're feeling, but like, I'm here for you. When it needs to be like, okay, like I need to try and place myself into your shoes and actually feel what you're feeling and believe every single word that you're saying so that I can help move forward and change this for the next situation and encounter. It's really easy for me to get defensive, for my peers to get defensive when acts of social injustice and racial injustice happens. But I think it's being able to appreciate those who are holding us accountable and appreciating the microscope that recent acts has put all of us underneath, and being able to be like, hey, like, yes, this is calling me out, but like, I need this and this world needs this to be able to move forward.
Great. Thank you all. We are almost at the hour, and I know we could have these conversations and keep going. I hope that, first, thank you all to the panelists. Let's please just give them It is not easy at all to share your truth in front of people that you see every day and that you will have to go back to the residence halls with, eat in the dining hall with, and sit in the classroom with. So what you all did, I'm very grateful to have you and for your willingness to be a part of this. I'd just like to challenge each one of you virtually and in the audience to not let this be the only talk you participate in. Lainey and Fatu have some plans for other talks as probably moving into next semester, just looking at time, but encourage these conversations in your classrooms, in your residence halls, sitting around in the dining hall and get to know people a lot better. What we want to do at this time is Pastor Christy Lohr-Sapp up to leave us with some closing words and thoughts. And again, we just greatly appreciate you all for joining us and look forward to continuing these impactful conversations. So we'll just give Pastor Lohr-Sapp a second to get up the steps and then we'll go from there.
I'm going to ask you to move down there so I can take my mask off. Thank you. I don't want to breathe on you. So first of all, let me echo what you just said, Emma, in terms of a word of thanks, both for you all, for your courage and your honesty and your forthrightness, but for everybody who took time tonight to listen to and to engage in this conversation, because it's so important, and it's one of the many, many, many steps that it will take to get us to a place of better reconciliation and understanding and humanity in our world. So thank you for taking time tonight to do this. I've made a couple notes that I'm going to try to read through, but I want to start with just saying Lenoir-Rhyne is a university in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. And through that Lutheran identity, some of the things that you have talked about tonight, you haven't used this word, but this is the word I heard. And this is the word that the ELCA, the denomination that supports this university, uses. Racism is a sin. And the ELCA named that explicitly at its church-wide assembly 2 summers ago in 2019. And so we can call it lots of different things, but part of that accountability that you talked about, Stephanie, is naming a sin when we see it. And the ELCA has taken a very firm stand and called racism a sin, called patriarchy a sin too. And I celebrate the fact that we are at an institution that is willing to name that and say we need to work to correct that. Because wherever we fall into sin, we need to work to confess that and then change. The video that we watched tonight began with the little cartoon image, which my children recognized when I was watching it at home, that said that you can't change prejudice by law. But the good news is that the God of creation changes hearts. And so if it may seem like it takes forever, but God can change people's hearts. Taught systems can be unlearned if we take the time, if we have the patience to try to unlearn something that we've been taught. But that also takes humility. And if we think back to the prophets of old, Micah, and the prophet Micah said, "What does the Lord require of you? But to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with your God." And humility is the other side of hubris. A lot of racist rhetoric, a lot of any kind of rhetoric that, what was the word you used, Juan? I think you said belittling and demoralizing. Is that the note I took? Degrading, belittling and degrading. That's hubris. And the other side of hubris is humility. We swim in the waters of injustice, but we're required to realize and acknowledge that we all make mistakes. That takes humility. God troubles the waters, and it takes humility and patience with ourselves and with others to work on changing that. From ancient times, we have sacred texts that have offered guidance on how to treat other people. This transcends our traditions. It transcends culture. It transcends any one religious ideology, but it rests on a common concept. The golden rule, you can call it that, you can call it do unto others. It rests on a common concept that the other is also a human, and you have to recognize the humanity of the person standing in front of you or beside you. In Judeo-Christian language, we would call that the Imago Dei, that all people are created with the image of God imprinted on them. And therefore, we have to work. Sometimes we have to work really, really hard to see the image of God in another person, especially when that person is using language that's belittling and degrading, especially when that other person is treating you with hostility. But we have to believe, and we have to work hard. That's a discipline, to recognize the humanity of all people and to see, even if it's buried deep down inside, the face of God in all people that we encounter. And Stephanie, you made a comment about, I wrote, "That's how they see you." What would it mean if the way they saw you was as a blessed child of God? Because my theology holds that we are all blessed children of God. And when we lose sight of that, then we slip into the sin of racism and prejudicial thinking. And none of us is immune to sin, which is where the humility comes in. We all have to work daily on how we address the ways that we slip up and the ways that we offend others, and repeatedly ask for forgiveness and come with contrition to these conversations. Olivia, you said it sucks that it took you 21 years to realize what was going on. And I pray that the God of creation, that the God who discomforts will burst those bubbles, the bubbles of complacency, the bubbles of privilege, the bubbles of oblivion that allow us, those, especially those of us, I don't have the same stories that some of you all have. I benefit from the privileges of being a white cisgender Christian woman. And it's uncomfortable to realize that as much as my heart may be in the work of justice, my exterior speaks of all of those injustices. And I pray that God will discomfort me enough to do something about it, that God will discomfort me enough to burst that bubble and to force me into a reality where I can't live in that bubble, because living in my bubble means that I'm ignoring the plight of someone else, of a brother or sister who needs an advocate that maybe I could be, or that maybe I will need to advocate for me one day. William, you said something about never being able to truly understand the perspective, walking in the shoes of other people. I would challenge everybody to both realize that you're never going to understand another person's lived reality, but you should never stop trying. You should never stop trying to learn from another person's perspective, but also allowing another person's story to have an impact on your life and the way that you respond to the world. Maybe that means that you allow another person's story to cause you to question what you hear, to cause you to question what you see on the news, what you read in the paper, to cause you to question what's presented as fact. You're never not going to be who you are, but you can always allow other people's realities to have an impact on how you understand the world around you. And that, I think, also speaks to holding people accountable, which is something that you said, Stephanie. There's an individual responsibility that we all have to treat each other with kindness and justice and respect, with loving kindness, as my Buddhist friends would say. But we also have to hold each other accountable for that. And that, again, goes with that idea of humility and hubris and naming a thing. Martin Luther was big about naming a thing what it is, and that's accountability, saying that's wrong, and we need to work together to change it. I think the last comment I want to make, two comments actually. I'm a preacher. We keep going sometimes, especially if we don't have a script in front of us. William, you talked about the educational system, and I want to underscore what you said and also reiterate that that many of the things that we embody, we are taught, and we don't even realize that we are taught them. And we should never be so haughty as to think that we're above that. Therefore, we should always, all of us, regardless of the level of education that we have, never rest on the fact that we know it all, and never assume that we have all the answers. I think an education that doesn't teach you always to question yourself, to check your sources, is an injustice. My dad used to say, my dad was a Lutheran pastor, who was also an LR alumni. My parents met here at LR. My dad used to say, Jesus came to take away your sins, not your mind. And I think that we always need to question. We need to be able to question in a way that seems respectful, but we also need to avail ourselves of opportunities. And so when you say that educators aren't challenging the systems that are taught to us, we also need to work hard to insist that educators have the opportunities to learn implicit bias, to learn about all of these, about racial equity and racial justice and these things, because we have a generation of educators for whom that wasn't a part of their training. Hopefully that will change, but none of us is too old to learn and to challenge the way that we're thinking. And I want to end on the note of choice. Choosing to care, I think, is how Olivia said it. We all make choices every single day. And sometimes it can feel paralyzing, the number of choices that we have to make, the number of ripples that a choice can have in our personal lives and in our world. But each day we can choose love. We can choose selflessness. Yes. We can choose humility, and we can make those choices in small ways and big ways. It doesn't have to be all at once. One day, you can choose to read an article that makes you uncomfortable, but that helps broaden your thinking. The next day, you can choose to have a conversation with somebody that you might never have spoken to. Maybe a week from now, you'll have built up to choosing to joining a campus event that is like this. And then maybe later, you'll choose to write a paper that involves digging deeper into a concept. We can make choices every single day that are a part of the path of this journey. Juan, you said that change is like a plant that needs tending. It's also like a road that never ends. We don't just change and then think it's done. This is a discipline. Racial justice, any kind of justice, is a discipline that we have to wake up choosing to engage in every day. And I applaud you all for the step that you made in doing that today. And I'm grateful to be in this community with you and give thanks for your willingness to sit in a really cold auditorium to talk about these things and to commit to making change in your own world. So thank you.
Thank you all so much for joining us. Don't forget, if you have your tickets, I think the Pelicans ice cream is right out here somewhere. So don't forget to stop by and get your gift, your treat.